FanScape, a FanFiction podcast, presents Blood and Venom Part 2, Shattered Reality. Chapter 2, Down the Rabbit Hole.
Lauren sat on an old couch in a small living room, staring blankly at the laptop resting on the coffee table in front of her. She was clad in black sweatpants and a baggy brown sweatshirt. Her dark hair was a mess, and she was wrapped in a warm blanket. Her tired eyes were glued to the screen, but her mind was elsewhere. While she scrolled through any information she could find about Oakside and its history, the events from 2 nights before kept replaying in her head. Her memories of the incident were mostly a blur, but what she could remember properly had been haunting her ever since. She remembered answering the call from Kate, who'd been phoning her in excitement to tell her about how she'd finally been hired at a local business after trying for so long. Lauren felt terrible about crushing her moment of happiness with the bad news, especially since those moments were so rare for Kate, so she promised to talk about it more when things calmed down. She remembered having to hang up on her worried friend when the police arrived and were pointed in her direction by Debbie, but not before Kate made her promise to keep her updated on the situation. She couldn't recall much of the following conversation, but she remembered handing the police the note that threatened her life and being told that she should stay somewhere else while they performed an investigation. Aaron had been her obvious choice. In one phone call later, he was driving her back to his place after helping her pack her things. The one-story house he rented on the outskirts of town was a bit bigger than her apartment, albeit less tidy, but it was cozy enough. However, the knowledge that someone was keeping tabs on her had kept her holed up inside ever since she'd arrived. The little sleep she'd been able to get had been restless at best, but she was also staying with a friend who'd suffered from chronic night terrors for years and knew a thing or two about remedying them, so he'd been especially helpful on that front. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the footsteps heading her way.
"Hey,"
a voice said, making her jump. Her panicked eyes shot up from her laptop to see Aaron standing next to her. And it was only after her heart rate began to slow back down that she noticed the 2 bowls in his hands, steam coming out of both of them.
Thanks, but I am not very hungry.
"Lauren, it's been 2 days. You need to eat something,"
Aaron said with a hint of worry in his voice, holding one of the bowls out to her.
"Starving yourself isn't going to make this go away."
She hesitated for a few moments before finally caving in and taking the bowl.
Thanks.
Aaron nodded before setting his own bowl on the coffee table and heading back into the kitchen.
"You want anything to drink?"
he shouted from the other room.
Sure.
"What do you want?"
Surprise me,
she said, taking a bite of the stew he'd made for her. Aaron was right. She hadn't realized how hungry she was. He returned a few moments later carrying mixed drinks, taking a drink from his cup as he handed her the second one. She snickered as she took the glass from him.
"What?"
he said, picking up his stew bowl.
I don't think I've seen you drink anything other than booze or coffee since I got here.
"I drink to forget, but I always remember,"
Aaron joked, sitting down in an armchair and beginning to eat.
"You like it?"
he said between bites.
Yeah, this is really good. What's in it?
"Nothing fancy. It's just beef stew. My mom taught me how to make it before,"
Aaron said, stopping mid-sentence. A gloomy look spread across his face, and he glanced at the ground for a moment before continuing.
"Before I left home."
Aaron's family was a touchy subject. From what she understood, there had been some sort of falling out between them a few years back, before she ever met him. He didn't talk about them much, and when he did, it was usually in passing reference. Lauren knew better than to pry for information, as it was one of the only things he wouldn't open up about. But it still bugged her that yet another friend was hiding something important from her.
I'm right here if you ever want to talk about it. You know that, right?
"Yeah, I know. Thanks, Lauren,"
he muttered, managing a weak smile.
"Christ, I'm supposed to be the one comforting you right now, not the other way around."
Well, that just goes to show how lost you'd be without me.
Shut up. Anyway, you mind if I turn on the TV?
Go ahead. I'm done working for the night anyway.
Lauren answered. They sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the news as they ate.
And as you can see behind me, the scene here at Scarlet Ridge is a lot quieter now than it was only a few short hours ago when the bodies were discovered. An investigation is currently underway, and the police say that while the two hikers who found the victims are not considered suspects, the deaths have officially been labeled a homicide. Authorities aren't disclosing any personal information about the victims at this time, but due to the shockingly violent nature of the murders, family members will likely have to be called in to help confirm their identities. Little has been revealed about the time of death and the condition the bodies were found in, but it's been stated the wounds were comparable to those caused by an axe or a hatchet. No suspects have been identified at this time, but authorities are actively searching for the killer and have issued a warning for nearby community members to secure their homes and keep an eye out for any suspicious activity. Leading the investigation is Providence's own Detective Elliot Reynolds, who has assured us that swift justice will come to whoever is responsible for this horrible tragedy. But even with the promise of retribution, it'll be some time before Johnston residents are able to rest easy once again. That's all the information we currently have on the situation, but we'll keep you updated as the story unfolds. To all of our viewers at home, stay strong, stay vigilant, and stay safe. We'll get through this together. This is Ashley Warren with Channel 12, signing off.
Aaron immediately regretted turning the news on, and after glancing over at Lauren, who was already paranoid enough without having to hear about an axe murderer running around, quickly changed the channel and landed on an old Western movie. However, he wasn't paying attention to the rerun of Tombstone. Instead, the grim report had him thinking about something he'd been considering since before his friend's troubles had ever begun.
So I was thinking,
Aaron said, wiping his mouth.
You're registered to carry, right?
Yeah.
Lauren said, setting the empty bowl on the coffee table.
I just never followed through with actually getting a gun.
Good. Tomorrow, I want to take you to get one.
He said, surprising her.
I've been meaning to get you one ever since you started working on all these sketchy-ass cases with Russ. I know you're a bit nervous around guns, but I think we'd both feel a lot better if you had something to protect yourself with, especially now. I hate to entertain the idea, but pepper spray probably isn't going to cut it if this asshole decides to come after you.
Well, that's what I have you for, right? My personal bodyguard.
Lauren half-heartedly joked.
Lauren, I will do everything I possibly can to keep you safe. If someone comes through that door looking for you, I'll make them wish they hadn't. But as much as I wish I could be, I can't be here to protect you 24/7. You need to be able to defend yourself.
Lauren sat there for a few moments, looking at the TV as she mulled over everything he'd said. Eventually, she had an answer.
Okay, let's do it.
You sure?
Aaron asked, surprised how easy it had been to convince her.
Positive. You'll have to give me a refresher course, though. It's been a long time since I've even seen a gun.
All right then, we'll head to a store tomorrow and pick one out for you. Or I can pick it up myself, if you'd rather stay here.
Aaron said, noticing her fearful look when he'd suggested leaving the apartment.
We'll have to wait a few days for an approval, but it shouldn't be a problem. You can use one of mine in the meantime. I'll buy the thing for you and some ammo to go with it. Think of it as an early Christmas present.
He said with a grin.
Do you always get firearms in your stocking?
Shit, with my dad, I'm surprised I never got a hand grenade. Anyway, the waiting period should be over before you head to Oakside. Or are you not doing that now?
I'm still going. After the last few nights, I need to get away from the city for a while. Even if I'm going to be paranoid the entire time. That, and I promised Kate ages ago that I'd help her move out of her house.
I'm surprised you're thinking about going anywhere near that place right now. I don't know all that much about your friend, but I feel like she'd understand if you couldn't make it, wouldn't she?
She would, but after everything that's happened between us, with how close we've gotten again over the past couple of months, I can't mess things up again, Aaron. I just can't.
Yeah, I get it.
Aaron muttered, clearly not on board with Lauren potentially putting herself in harm's way.
It's a good thing we're getting you that gun, huh?
Yes, it is.
Lauren sighed, picking her laptop up again and leaning back into the couch.
Besides, whoever left that note is more likely to try something here than in a whole other country.
You're probably right.
Aaron said, eyeing the laptop.
Didn't you say you were done working for the night?
I've said that about 12 times today. There's just so much to go over. If there's one thing I'm not going to do in all of this, it's letting whoever left that note scare me into quitting. I've been thinking about it a lot, and if solving this thing can bring them down too, then there's no way I'm stopping. I mean, what kind of PI backs down over one little threat?
Not a very good one, I suppose. You mind if I take a look at your notes?
He asked. Lauren shrugged and handed the laptop over to him. Oakside Investigation. History/footnotes. Established in 1881 as a trading post along a Rocky Mountain trail, Oakside has since become a popular village for those looking for an escape from the noise and commotion of urban living. Prior to being incorporated as a village, a collection of settlements took root around the Oakside trading post. From there, entrepreneurs began their foray into the mountains in search of wealth. Coleman Mines, established in 1895, would eventually become the most successful enterprise in Oakside, providing employment to a large number of families within the community. Following the closure of the mines, many families left Oakside. Only recently has the community bounced back through successful marketing as a relaxing summer getaway. With Oakside housing prices on the rise, many longtime residents are putting their homes up for sale in hopes of gaining a substantial profit and relocating closer to the foothills. While Oakside experiences little activity during the winter, the summer months bring a flurry of visitors seeking its beautiful trails and enticing festivals. During some of the hotter and drier days of summer, park officials will often enforce a fire ban, much to the displeasure of eager campers. While once a prominent hunting ground, Oakside Park now prides itself as a charming recreational area for families. Area mountaineers will often use their bright flashlights to stun and scare off invasive animals, such as raccoons and coyotes, from scavenging through their supplies at night. Points of interest. Like many mountain towns, Oakside has maintained a long history of disappearances among its residences. Oddly, though, very few remains have ever been recovered. As reports of missing surveyors and prospectors rapidly escalated in the spring of 1901, police mandated that all intended routes of travel must be given to police prior to departure. After an area hiker failed to report back in to park staff, rangers feared that an undernourished bear had been roaming the park area. After several failed attempts, the bear was never tracked. Soon after Oakside opened its first campground, many residents reported a night prowler stalking their homes. The reports continued for years until coming to a quick and sudden end. As Oakside Park began to expand, campers reported children playing outside of their tents at night. Though the children were never identified, complaints resulted in a strict campsite curfew. Night shift workers in the old Coleman mines often reported hearing crying coming from deep inside the tunnels. Though many search parties were sent into the tunnels, no one was ever found. Prior to a tragic arson incident that stunned the community, many Oakside residents reported the purported victim of the blaze as acting strange and withdrawn from his neighbors. While graffiti artists were once prominently vandalizing the park with erratic markings, incidents later took a sharp drop, which park officials often credited to a stern crackdown on park loitering. Residential development takes hold on Oakside Park outskirts, January 21st, 2010. Oakside is about to welcome new residents. With all lots now purchased, home developments are set to begin this spring. 6 new homes are expected to go up over the next year, with more to follow. The new homeowners will be the first new residents of the area since a fatal blaze 4 years ago that resulted in the death of one man. "We couldn't be happier to bring new life to this community," said Robert Belvedere, chairman of the Oakside Village Community Development Group. "We're pleased to welcome all the new families who want to call Oakside home." Fatal blaze erupts at Oakside home. Arson suspected. June 3rd, 2006. Oakside fire crews say a blaze at a southeast home resulting in 1 death may be the result of arson. Fire broke out at the home located just east of Oakside Lake, At 11:30 p.m. last night, neighbors knew the man living in the home, who is currently the only known fatality, as agitated and abrasive. He lost his son many years ago. Since then, he's never really acted the same. He would always claim to see his son standing outside his window, staring in, said Kim Rolick, a neighbor who's known the man for 20 years. Authorities say that Charles Matheson, 47, died of smoke inhalation. His body was found inside the basement of the home, shortly after fire crews put out the blaze. Cryptic symbols discovered on Halloween night, November 2nd, 2008. Residents of the Oakside area are reporting strange markings that seem to have inexplicably appeared overnight. Jack Bennett, an Oakside resident of 15 years, reports his experience from a late October evening.
The fog was rolling in, and the moon peeked through the clouds, lighting the path. I was out for a late-night walk in the woods. I could hear leaves crunching under someone's footsteps. And I quickened my pace. I felt someone watching me. I saw someone, a dark figure in the corner of my eye. In my panic, I started sprinting back towards my house, but my toe caught on a root and I fell to the ground. When I looked up, I noticed these weird drawings on a brick wall.
Further reports suggest that these markings could be linked to occult activity. Oakside authorities are urging citizens to take extra safety precautions for the time being.
Those notes aren't much more than some newspaper clippings and a handful of details that caught my eye.
Lauren said, watching as he looked over her work.
I even found an old Oakside Park pamphlet from back when it was still open. Some of that stuff probably isn't important at all, like the thing about animals being scared of flashlights, but I do like to be thorough.
Nothing wrong with that.
Aaron muttered, his eyes still glued to the screen.
That name, Matheson. Why does it sound familiar?
Because I've mentioned it to you before. A while back, my friend Carl found something pretty bad while he was investigating an old family farm of theirs, remember?
Sort of. I see so much weird shit working with Russ that I tend to forget a lot of it.
Well, long story short, Carl went there to investigate a kid's disappearance, and it didn't go very well. I don't know what happened because he still refuses to talk about it, but it wasn't anything good. The property itself has a dark history, too. Something bad happened there back in the early 1900s, but nobody really knows what it was because the authorities never released the details. The only thing the rest of the town knows about it is that there was a pretty high body count. Everyone in Oakside is terrified of the place, so it's kind of a local ghost story. I think Carl might be the only person who's gone there in over a century.
This missing kid, would he happen to be Charles Matheson's son? The one that this arson article mentions?
Yeah, that's him all right. Charlie Matheson Jr. He went missing back in 1996 and they never found out what happened to him. He was only 6 years old.
Lauren said, a hint of sadness in her voice.
I guess Carl somehow got to know Charlie's father before the guy died in that house fire. Because Charles was the reason he decided to investigate the farm.
So, on top of all the other evidence you've gathered, this Matheson family has their own mystery going on in the background. Do you think they're connected to everything else?
I'm not sure, but I wouldn't bet against it.
Me either. We're definitely missing something here. I just don't know what.
Aaron pondered.
Just don't take anything you find at face value. There's always more to the story, even if you think you have it all figured out. The thing about these cases is that things usually aren't as they seem. Maybe you really are close to figuring it all out. But in my experience, it's a good idea to expect the unexpected. That way you're less likely to be caught off guard. But, with that being said, this probably isn't something you're going to solve tonight. So why don't you turn that thing off and take a break for a while? You've got enough on your plate as it is without working yourself to death on some century-old mystery. Like that house you're selling. How's that going anyway?
Oh, Kate and I are pretty much done with all of that. There's only a couple of things we have left to do. The funny thing is, even that is starting to overlap with the mystery. The lady we're selling the house to is
Lauren said, suddenly interrupted by a sharp chime from her phone. She glanced at the screen and read over the new message.
I can't thank you enough for coming out all this way to help me out. It's been a pretty rough road trying to sell this old place. I wish I had turned to you sooner. You have no idea how happy I'll be once this is all behind me.
Sorry, I just got a message from Kate.
Lauren said as she sent a response.
That's all right. I'm used to you ignoring me.
Yeah, I bet.
Lauren said, pretending to not notice the smirk on his face.
It's cool. I know you two haven't seen each other in a long time. Trust me, I get it.
I just want to do right by her. I haven't really been there for her when she needed me, so I don't really want to let her down this time.
Well, focus on that then. Quit drowning yourself in your work and worry about helping your friend. The mystery has been there for 100 years. It's not going anywhere. This could be your last chance to make things right, so focus on that for now.
I know, you're right.
She said, a small grin appearing on her face.
Thanks, Aaron.
Don't mention it.
Aaron said, standing up and beginning to clean up their dinner mess.
But while you're at it, you should really think about coming to that bonfire we were talking about before your apartment got broken into. Lily will be there. Luke, Gavin, Dwight, Russ, Cole, a few others. You could always invite a few of your other friends, too. Everyone wants to see you again. We can get that gun for you, and I'll teach you how to use it while we're there, too. What do you think?
I don't know, Aaron. It sounds fun, but I just don't know.
Lauren muttered, looking down at the ground.
Listen, I'm not going to force you to do anything you don't want to do. But I think it would be really good for you to get out of the house and have some fun. Might help take your mind off of everything.
I'll think about it.
She said, managing a smile. The days leading up to Lauren's departure went by quickly after that, and she was doing better and better with each passing day. She was still staying with Aaron, who'd kept his promise and bought her a handgun to call her own. It was a Springfield .45 to be exact, and it ended up being a perfect fit for the aspiring gunslinger as he'd taken to calling her. She wasn't quite ready to go back to her apartment just yet, but she had managed to work up enough courage to go with Aaron to the bonfire he'd been talking about. She was happy to find out that he'd been right. Being there and seeing everyone again had ended up helping a lot more than she'd expected, as did the training he'd put her through to teach her how to handle her new gun. He taught her all about gun safety, trigger discipline, weapon maintenance, and everything in between, some of which was new information to her. A few days ago, she would have been useless if handed a firearm, but now she felt like she could take on the most fearsome outlaws of the Wild West. She felt good. More than good. She felt safe. And it was all thanks to Aaron. He'd been so understanding while she'd been staying with him. He'd done everything he could to make her feel better, and he never asked for anything in return. He was more than just a friend. He was her brother. And for that reason, she felt a pang of sadness as he helped her get ready to leave for Oakside.
Is that everything?
It should be. We've checked over everything like 3 times.
You remember everything I taught you about that gun, right?
How could I forget? You've only quizzed me on it 50 times.
I just want to make sure you're actually paying attention. Seriously, though, keep that thing unloaded and in its case while you're traveling. You don't want any trouble from the law, especially since you're going to be crossing the border. Keep it in the back seat in case you end up needing it, though. Speaking of which,
he said, reaching into his van and retrieving 2 magazines.
Take these. 2 mags should be more than enough ammo.
Thanks.
Lauren said, stashing them near the gun case and shutting the door.
So I just tell the border service that I have a handgun with me then?
Yeah, that's about all there is to it. We have all your permits in order, so they shouldn't give you any shit while you're trying to cross.
He said, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes. He may have been good at hiding it, but Aaron Carter was not a morning person.
Well, I guess I'd better be on my way then. I have a long drive ahead of me.
That you do. I'll have to find something else to do without you around too,
he said before being cut off.
Thank you.
She said, hugging him tightly.
For everything.
Of course.
He said, grinning softly as he returned the embrace.
Your family.
They separated a few moments later, and Lauren smiled back at him before making her way to her car.
Be safe,
he said as she got in and drove off. Aaron was confident that she was going to be fine. He'd done everything he could to prepare for any situation headed her way. However, as convinced as he was that no harm would befall his surrogate sister, he couldn't help but feel nervous. It was when he was at his most confident that things usually tended to go wrong. He'd hoped with everything he had that she wouldn't need to use any regular bullets, let alone the silver-tipped ones that he'd given her. It was nice being on the road. As good as Lauren had been doing recently, she still couldn't help but feel paranoid about the ominous letter left in her apartment. Being away from the city did wonders for her mental health, and having nothing to worry about other than what station to set her radio to for a couple of days took a lot of weight off her shoulders. She probably could have made the drive to Oakside quicker than she actually did, but it had been a long time since she'd been on a road trip. So she found herself stopping at stores, restaurants, hotels, and other tourist attractions along the way. She remained in contact with Kate the entire time, sending messages and talking on the phone with her on a frequent basis. It almost felt like she had her best friend in the car with her, and given the opportunity, she would have loved to bring Kate along on a trip like this. There was only one thing that was bothering her. Neither of them had heard from Carl in days, aside from a single text message he'd sent Kate stating that he was busy with something. It could have been that he was so upset by Lauren coming over that he decided to shun both of them. But that didn't seem like something Carl would do, so they began to fear that something else was going on with them. Lauren couldn't quite wrap her head around their enigmatic friend, but Kate always had a way of seeing right through his mysterious nature and assured Lauren that everything would be fine. It was as she was nearing the end of her trip that she finally grew tired of both regular restaurants and the food she'd packed into a cooler, and so shortly after crossing the border that separated Montana from Alberta, Lauren finally broke down and settled for some fast food. She ate at an old picnic table across the parking lot from the drive-thru, enjoying the afternoon warmth that came so rarely in the fall. Halfway through her meal, she noticed a billboard nearby that featured a picture of a family vacationing near a boardwalk. As insignificant as it was, she couldn't help but smile at the picture, as it reminded her of someone from her past. She'd met him while going to college in Florida, and they'd quickly gone from classmates to friends and then to something more. She dated him for over a year, and Lauren could safely say that it had been one of the best years of her life. She could still vividly remember sitting on the beach with him after classes, going to movies, hiking the many nature trails in the area, visiting each other's families, and going for long evening walks on the boardwalk at a local park. However, as great of a time as she'd had with him, their paths had eventually diverged. She'd wanted to pursue her career waiting for her in Providence, and he'd wanted to stay in Florida and continue his education. Neither of them had liked the idea of a long-distance relationship, so they'd broken up on good terms, remaining friends through it all. She still wore the black necklace that he'd given her for their anniversary, and she thought of him every time she put it on in the morning or saw it in a mirror. Even with as good of a life as she'd built for herself in Providence, she often wished that she'd never left his side in Florida, especially after seeing what had become of him since then. His downward spiral began with the untimely death of his cousin, someone who'd been like a brother to him. It had only gotten worse as the years went on. They hardly even talked anymore, and the last time she'd visited him was years ago, when she'd stopped by to attend his aunt's funeral. He'd seemed like a whole different person then, as if he'd gone through a war. She tried so hard to get him to let her help, but much like Kate and Carl, he just wouldn't let her in.
Yet another person I failed.
She thought sadly as she got back on the road. Lauren had a lot of regrets, and letting him go, a man she clearly still had feelings for, was one of her biggest ones. Thunder rumbled across the sky and rain pelted her windshield as Lauren finally reached the outskirts of Oakside. It was well into the night, and she was far too tired to be driving, especially in these conditions. The road was slick with mud and rain, and the mountains stood dark and ominous far off in the distance. And it was so dark that the pine trees just off the road could only be seen amidst the clash of lightning. The savage wind blew twigs and wet leaves across the road, leaves that stuck to her windshield and made it even harder to see. But Lauren was determined to make it to Kate's house. Until her eyes started playing tricks on her, that is. It was when a particularly bright bolt of lightning crackled across the sky that she saw it. A tall, dark figure standing in the middle of the road, only a few feet in front of her. One that looked like a person, but was far too tall and thin to be one. She slammed on her brakes, skidding forward across the wet asphalt until her car made an abrupt stop. Breathing heavily, she strained to see the figure that had nearly been mowed over by her Volvo. But there was nothing. The only thing her headlights illuminated was a dark, empty road devoid of life. On that note, she pulled over at the nearest motel, checking in quickly and collapsing on a rickety old bed. Lauren hardly even had the energy to worry about the fact that she hadn't heard from Kate all day, and so she sent one last text her way before setting her phone on the nightstand. She was exhausted, and it wasn't long before she fell into an uneasy sleep, one riddled with strange dreams and visions of a tall, shadowy figure watching her from the forest.
Thank you for listening to Blood and Venom, written by Arthur Faraday, under the username WoodMr13, distributed on Archive of Our Own. Season 2 of FanScape has been funded by the Nevada Arts Council and the National Endowment of the Arts. Starring Aubrey Lima as Lauren Jones, David Klein II as the narrator, Matty James as Aaron Carter, Cathryn Archer as Kate Milens, Vivian Reed as Ashley Warren, guest starring Harlan Guthrie as the introduction narrator, Fogcast as Jack Bennett, intro and credits music created by Dylan Griggs. Special thanks to our fellow podcasting friends who have helped make Season 2 possible at Malevolent, Through the Fog, The Impala Films, creators of Haunted and audio drama, Woe Begone, The Morbid Forest, and our friends at World Beyond and Jabun Audio. Before we end the episode, I just want to take a moment to say that while Season 2 of FanScape was funded by a grant, future seasons will be done so out of pocket. This show has a high production cost, and any assistance you can give, be it by sharing FanScape with a friend, or by joining our Patreon or Ko-Fi, or even buying merch to help fund the show financially, would be greatly appreciated and will help make Season 3 come sooner rather than later. Links for this and everything else mentioned in the credits can be found in the description or at thefanscape.com. Thank you for listening.